very conceivably shoot a deer that you think, oh, that's a healthy deer. It looks normal, but it has CWD. It just has not advanced to the clinical symptomatic stage yet, but it's still um, infectious and capable of spreading the disease. So I think that's the real danger, as somebody goes out of state, harvest a deer or an elk that they think, oh, that's a perfectly healthy animal I just killed. I don't need to worry about that. I can bring this back. It's not a sick animal. But it is, because you can't tell until you do the lab testing on it. And so that's really what we've tried to make people aware of, is to say, hey, this, you know, yeah, at some point these animals do get clinically sick and have symptoms. And yeah, most people would be able to tell that's not a healthy animal, but that can take, a year and a half or 2 years or more, um, before an animal gets to that symptomatic point. But that doesn't mean they're not diseased and not capable of transmitting the disease and have infected parts. And what most people want to bring back are the most infected parts. It's the head and the spine. So, and our concern is, how, once it gets back, how is that handled and disposed of? And what could be infected in the process? And if a deer parts are just tossed out onto the landscape, then that's high risk. So that's kind of our big thing is, as you mentioned, we're one of 2 states in the Southeast that don't have it, and we're trying to put everything in place we can to keep it that way as long as possible.
Yeah, so let's kind of jump into sort of what it is real quick.
Yeah.
A prion is a protein, I mean, for all definitions, it's just a bent protein, right? Like that's kind
Yeah.
of what it comes down to. Is it's just got a funny bend in it.
Yeah. Yeah. So CWD is a prion disease. And like I said, a prion is a protein. And so, most diseases that people are familiar with are either, bacterial or viral or occasionally fungal. And so that's a little easier to kind of wrap your brain around, something that, has, bacterial or viral base. But this is caused by this, misshapen um, protein, that basically these prions are normal in mammals. We have prions. All animals have prions, and they are just a protein that has some function in the body, that's probably some kind of intercellular communication or something. And they're kind of short-lived in the body. They do their whatever their task is, and then they get broken down into their amino acid parts and go away. Well, these bad prions are misshapen, and they don't break down, and they stay in the body. And then for whatever reason, when they get into the brain, they end up killing neurons in the brain. And so when they do that, they leave a little hole in the brain. And so that's, CWD is in the family of diseases called transmissible spongiform encephalopathy. So the transmissible means it's contagious, can be spread from animal to animal. Spongiform, so it means it leaves holes, and encephalopathy means it affects the brain and nervous system. So these prions get in, an animal ingests one of these disease prions. It then encounters normal prions, but then somehow the messages them to have this malformation. So it's kind of a chain reaction cascade event, to where you end up over time getting more and more of these disease prions in the body. And they tend to kind of want to make their way to the nervous system, the spinal cord and brain and lymph nodes. And like I said, when they get in the brain, they end up setting up shop and killing neurons. And so over time, you just get all these little spongy holes in the brain, and and then when it hits kind of a critical mass and there's enough of that, then you start getting neurological symptoms because the brain is not functioning properly anymore. And that's when these deer, or other, elk, moose, whatnot, start having these outward symptoms, after it's kind of hit that, it takes a long time for it to build up like that and get to a point. But yeah, eventually after, year and a half, 2 years or so, they start getting symptomatic. And, and that's things like, as the disease is called, wasting disease, they just kind of waste away. They lose a lot of weight. They lose a lot of body condition. Their hair coat looks terrible. They, have excessive drinking and urination, excessive salivation, head tremors, and staggering, kind of lose their balance, stand with a wide stance. Basically they just kind of waste away physically, and then and mentally, they're
Yeah, yeah.
neurologically, they just start getting, they're just kind of out of it. They lose their balance, they lose their sense of awareness, and they're just kind of, you know, in a state, and I hate the term, but you see the media sometimes call this zombie deer
I
or
was just
something.
gonna I was gonna use that word. I was waiting for that
Yeah, and
word.
I hate that, but it is kind of, they just are kind of in this zombie state where they're just out of it. They just don't have any awareness of what's going on around them. And then eventually, just from lack of eating and the disease, starting to affect other parts of the body, they just kind of waste away and die. So it's 100% fatal. And obviously, it doesn't necessarily kill all the deer. Some of these deer will start getting symptomatic and will die of something else. We think a lot of them are probably more prone to roadkill and being killed by predators because they're not quite with it mentally. They're they're probably not making good decisions, or they're not aware of their surroundings, and so a lot of them succumb to other mortality factors. But the bottom line is, no deer's ever recovered from it, or
Yeah, yeah.
lived. Eventually, it's going to kill them if something else doesn't kill them first.
And it's not like you can inoculate, well, as of right now, there's no cure for it because most of our medical technology is oriented towards killing something, right? To kill a bacteria or to eliminate a virus. I mean, there's not a whole lot. There's antivirals out there, but viruses are very difficult to deal with. You kind of just let them run their course,
Right.
but they run a course. Viruses tend to run a course, and your immune system takes care of it.
Yeah.
Bacteria, you can do things about it to kill the bacteria. Fungicide, you can use an antifungal agent,
Yeah.
for a fungal infection. But a prion disease is like,
Yeah, there's no treatment, no cure, no vaccine, because like you said, it's not one of those typical uh pathways of a disease, to be transmitted by, bacteria or virus. Um and there's these type diseases, and it's not just in deer. And I think, some people probably know this, but there these, CWD is in deer, um but similar diseases, bovine spongiform encephalopathy, or mad cow disease in cattle, that a lot of people have heard of. Disease called scrapie in sheep. There's a feline version and a mink version. And even in humans, there's something called Crutchfield-Jakob disease. So there are, other diseases out there in the same kind of family, these prion diseases, spongiform encephalopathy diseases, that affect other species and even humans. Um, they're all usually species specific. They don't cross species barriers. Like, there's no evidence so far that CWD can go to other species.